So we had a bit of a robust discussion about the different threats to understories, and it was interesting that we had a lot of focus on the removal of firewood and hollow logs, etc. And also a bit of a discussion about the conflict between overgrazing and undergrazing. I guess the key points that we came to in terms of looking after those particular values, and I think it probably actually did go further than just the understory in the end. But we recognise that probably the most important thing is to resource the LHPA with funds, or whoever ultimately will be looking after the travelling stock reserves. But we recognise very, very strongly that the LHPA have got the skills. So we'd like to see that maintenance of that skill. There's a real risk of loss of that corporate knowledge that the LHPA staff have. So I think probably a key thing is that there needs to be a stability of management, a stability of resourcing to ensure that management that these travelling stock reserves have been getting up till now, and that the recognition that the reason why those values are there is because of the management that they've received all these, 150 years, whatever it is. It's a huge span of time. There's certainly a recognition that funding is short. There was a discussion from various CMA people and also Commonwealth people on our group, and clearly the best way to resource these important values is to ensure that there's some sort of stewardship funding. It shouldn't just be a one-off funding, and that's been tried in the past, but a funding that actually continues into the future. To get the support for that sort of funding, we also feel that education of the broader public, the New South Wales community, is really important. And I personally see that the role of the NPA in this is really to actually get that message out there, to raise the awareness of the importance of the travelling stock reserve network. And once there's that recognition, that'll feed back to make it easier to get more funding for the reserves. So I guess resourcing and recognition of the skills of the rangers and the managers of the travelling stock reserves. We took a little bit of time in the end to just make a very quick list of the values that these things have. I think it's worth documenting them as well. Clearly there's values to the neighbouring landholders and the rural community. There's a recognition that there's a seed bank there of native grasses and other species. The TSRs in some instances probably provide windbreaks. There's certainly ecosystem services, the sort of things that Pio was talking about before, the bees and the birds and the butterflies and all the other bee things that Pio talks about.
Probably we need to...
Yep.
Maybe just to note that you've captured
Yep.
values.
And of course, there's a huge list of other values which are broader values for the community. So scientific, educational, conservation, that recognition that this is a unique system, and that they also capture really poorly represented ecosystems which are not represented in the Parks Service, in the Parks network. So box woodlands, grasslands, other grassy ecosystems which are not actually in the national park system. So that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Under-resourcing. We need more resources. That means money and staff, human resources, and that's a common call. Governments say there's a limit to the purse, but resources are needed so that the appropriate authority can do the job it has to do. Number 2, we need education and community involvement. We need the involvement of schools to come and do nature studies and hands-on planting, looking, weeding. So they understand the significance of the TSRs and see our natural environment up close. The thought was also people need to be aware of legislation, because many of us are ignorant about the legislation for TSRs. I think you can pick up dead wood from the ground, but you obviously can't chop down trees. And people are unaware of all of that. We're also concerned with, I'll just follow on from education and community awareness. We need an authority that is central. We need baseline data that is accessible from one authority, that is not fragmented. And with this, we need to liaise with organisations like Green Corps, Blaze, conservation groups, land care groups, so that we can work together and increase the public awareness. We also need better signage of TSRs. We need to emphasise that TSRs are important for endangered species, remnant vegetation. They are important as refuges, and they're providing some sort of natural corridor and natural landscape. We hope that native forests are not cleared to make way for the private woodlots, but there is cleared land that could perform that significance, or perform that function, I should say. So, to my group, is there anything I've missed out? Any key point, do you think, in our key solutions? All right, that's it. Thank you.
The main point we got at is that, and it's probably radical, and we need to change the Act itself. We need to change the Act so it can actually help the actual Rural Land Protection Board do what we are wanting them to do. From a cultural heritage point of view, from an Indigenous point of view, from a non-Indigenous point of view, from a conservation value, from a biodiversity value. We were talking about, I was talking about Aboriginal regional assessment programs that actually not only give value to a place, but actually link in all the other areas around that area, and possibly something that can be used for TSRs as well, is that you place value on a certain area, but also you map the area as well, and how that is valuable to those areas, to a particular area. We're talking about a database of actually collecting all that data from a historical point of view. We're talking about that, but also from a current point of view. So all that biodiversity can be captured in that database. I'm losing train of thought. I'm a bit nervous, so bear with me.
One thing was the capturing of funding to extend works over to cover the cultural and the heritage sites, but also to maintain the TSRs in the way they are. It was a fairly unanimous decision that the authorities are the ones who can handle it with the best resources, and for that to be assisted with public funding is what we really need to be pushing for.
So the concept was basically, we were saying, well, maybe if you change the Rural Land Protection Board so it actually looks at a broader picture and actually brings in some of the other government departments to help the guys out, such as national parks, such as where I work as cultural heritage officer and things like that. We can come in and actually support the actual the guys on the ground when they need that support. And with that, you actually build up a lot of the historical. We can draw in the historical background of some of those TSRs from a cultural point of view and from a non-Indigenous point of view as well.
One of the last points we had was certainly mining and carbon offsets. We really need to be looking to see if there's an opportunity for mining companies now to be providing offsets in support of the travelling stock reserves. They're a unique identity across the whole of Australia, and why not be targeting them to be supporting and putting back into the community for public lands and public good.
Hi, I'm Brian Boylan from the Game Council. I just really want to compliment the National Parks Association for inviting us along here, everyone along. You know, all of the group we had a very diverse group, from anglers to hunters to grey wavers to people who are birdos, and all of the group value the TSRs and want to move on in an inclusive manner. Inclusive is very important, because if we're not inclusive, we're going to lose some of the use of these reserves, and we won't have the support for them in the future. And part of the recreation thing that's really important is the sustainable use that recognises the pressures that they're currently under and also the opportunities for the future. And the TSRs, their use has changed significantly over time, and the use is increasing, and especially increasingly in recreation as well as grazing. And we need to have a management response that manages increased pressures and utilises revenue streams and volunteers, such as conservation hunters. We want a broadened representation of management that represents the change in use. And that was really important. The change in use is happening, and some of the user groups can give really good input into what we're doing. Broadened representation of management that represents the change in use. Okay, and finally, to bring it all together, we talked about a strategic, holistic landscape approach to recreation use management. We're thinking about across the whole area and how the change of land tenure, especially in the Murray-Red Gum area, to national parks, and there's the change in recreation and the access to those national parks is now putting pressure on the TSRs. I bet the people who thought about planning those national parks never ever thought that they would actually be having an environmental impact elsewhere by redirecting and compacting the use on some of these TSRs. While well-meaning, maybe we need to get into really good strategic, holistic planning for the future. And as part of that, we provide a code of conduct for TSR users in the future. Thank you.
So our priorities, I suppose, that come from the group at the end of the day when we hit the nail on the head was to have a single unified management authority with adequate resources to be able to manage and maintain and improve the state of the TSR network. To bring together all the whole of government data sets that are around on TSRs. There's information within what was DEC, which is now Office of Environment and Heritage, John Hibbard, Rainer Raywinkle, there's a whole heap of people around who have got information, CMAs. To pull all that together, have a proper inventory of the land parcels. At the moment, a lot of the mapping and data sets that are there are sort of there, but they're not 100% accurate. And but then to include the values that are on those TSRs in those data sets so that everyone can access them and have that information readily available. We identified that we need to look at the processes that are around that could demonstrate broader values of TSRs. One of those that came up was the CMAs at the moment are going through their CAP reviews, which is the Catchment Action Plan reviews. And in that process, we need to try and include that the TSR network is of great value, and I know a number of the CMAs have identified that the TSR network is of high value and it's a high value asset. We just need to probably put a bit more pressure on there for some of the other areas and have that intrinsically identified in the catchment action plans that come out at the end. We said a multi-partnership from the stakeholders in the room today is a multi-partnership to come up with a policy position that we can drive forward. And for that to be pushed forward into the LHPA review, if it fits into the terms of reference that I don't know that many people have actually seen just yet. And I suppose the last one was a commitment from everyone in the room here to engage in that LHPA review and so that it forms the outcome that we all are looking for. Because at the end of the day, I think we're all trying to hit that black spot or the blue spot in the middle.